A KELOLAND News investigation revealed massive worker shortages and mismanagement at the South Dakota Developmental Center, which had created a dangerous environment for both the workers and residents.
Now, in 2016, when KELOLAND Investigates first broke the story, the state-run Center for People with Severe Developmental Disabilities was 50 workers short. We heard from several former and even a current employee who suffered injuries on the job.
After our reports, the director of the center suddenly departed, replaced by long-term employee Barb Abelin. Workers at SDCC also voted to unionize.
Now, 3 years after our initial investigation, the union has filed a complaint of unfair labor practices with the Department of Labor and Regulation. In tonight's KELOLAND News investigation, Angela Kennecke sits down with a worker who was injured on the job, who claims she was then wrongfully terminated.
I just feel like we're set up for failure.
Whitney Dieterman began working at the South Dakota Developmental Center last spring. She says the current staff shortage of nearly 50 workers means a lot of overtime for employees.
They don't care if we have 16 to 20 hours of overtime and 1 day off a week. Like, that's what my schedule was.
We checked with the South Dakota Department of Human Services, which runs the Center for People with Intellectual Disabilities, and found out that employees at the center put in an additional 2,446 overtime hours in the last month.
I think it was because
Dieterman says even with those overtime hours, not all shifts are being filled. She was called in one night in late September to work in a dorm of 10 teenage boys with severe autism and extreme behaviors.
I usually don't work over there. Kind of a target for them, I would say, as a young female. So
Dieterman says after one staff member took a break, they were down to just 2 to watch over the boys when a fight broke out.
The next thing I knew, he became very upset and was yelling at me, coming at me. I got on my radio and I called for any additional help to please come to Nordello South. Nobody responded.
The reason that nobody answered your call wasn't that nobody cared.
Yeah.
It was that they're so short-staffed.
Mm-hmm.
Dieterman says finally another woman arrived from a neighboring dorm, leaving that facility with just 1 staff.
The last thing I remember was Anna shielding my head. And yeah, I was knocked unconscious and taken by ambulance out of Nordello South. He pulled my hair. I was kicked multiple times. He punched me multiple times. I couldn't see out of my left eye for two days. I have a herniated disc and a cracked vertebrae.
A few days after she got out of the hospital, Dieterman returned to work, where she felt there weren't enough employees working her first night back on the job. She says she didn't feel safe when a shift to care for 9 residents was covered by just 2 staff. SDDC says it aims to have 3 staff people on duty per 8 clients, while federal guidelines only call for a 1-to-8 ratio.
I stood up, I handed in my keys and my radio, and I said I was already a victim of an unsafe situation here, and I'm not doing it tonight. And I walked out.
Even after she walked out, Dieterman says she was asked by management to come back to work. Then she discovered she was represented by the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees.
And if you would have known, you could have contacted the union after you got hurt.
I would have done that.
But you didn't know that.
Yep, did not know.
The South Dakota Development Center is by far the most dangerous and has by far the most hostile management.
Union Representative Cooper Caraway says not informing workers that they have the right to be represented by the union is illegal, as well as not allowing union representation at disciplinary hearings, which is what Caraway claims has been happening at SDDC, even when he personally showed up at Dieterman's meeting with management.
Gave me the same instructions, I would not be permitted to speak or to represent the worker. So I let them know that that was illegal.
A few days later, Dieterman received this letter from the Department of Human Services saying she was being fired for abandoning her post on October 8th of 2018, alleging unsafe conditions. The Department of Human Services says Dieterman created a potentially dangerous setting where staff or clients could have been injured.
When they get back, they don't feel supported, they feel in fear for their job. The initial instinct is, okay, I'm going to get fired because I got hurt. And I've represented too many workers in front of the developmental center. who are being terminated or disciplined in one way or another because they got injured.
Caraway tells us he gets a couple of calls a month from SDDC workers in similar situations.
When the workers bring forth concerns about safety, they need to feel confident that management is going to listen and management is going to take steps to correct these things, and that they're not going to be retaliated against for bringing these things up. That is the main issue.
Was Whitney retaliated against?
Yes. Whitney was retaliated against because she was she was told she had her job. She was told her job was safe until they found out that she was working with the union.
The union has filed charges of unfair labor practices by the South Dakota Developmental Center with the State Department of Labor and Regulation. The South Dakota Department of Human Services tells KELOLAND Investigates it does not comment on matters that are in the administrative hearing process. A request for interviews with the interim Secretary of Human Services and the Director of SDDC were both denied.
Now, we have put all the employment and injury statistics on SDDC that we have compiled on this story on our Investigates page, as well as links to our original investigation into workplace issues at SDDC in 2016.